Welcome to Not Going Quietly, the podcast where we inspire growth, beat down biases, and get into all sorts of good trouble, with co-hosts Jonathan Beal and Britt East.
No topic is off limits as we explore ways to help everyone leap into life with a greater sense of clarity, passion, purpose, and joy.
So get ready to join us for some courageous conversation, because Not Going Quietly starts right now.
Welcome to Not Going Quietly, the podcast for outraged optimists and heartbroken healers all over the world, where we talk about everything nobody wants to because you all know you want to hear it. I'm here with my amazing co-host, Jonathan Beal. Jonathan, how's it going today?
Very well, very well. Enduring the cold British winters, but I'm good. How about you?
Okay. Stop the podcast. We're going to have to do this. We're going to do this better because in the U.S., Jonathan's in the UK. In the U.S., when somebody asks you how you're doing, the way you answer is perfect and improving. Everything's perfect in the U.S. Everybody's happy. Everything's going great. Now, the U.K., I know, is third world communist country.
Because, following both the U.K. and the U.S., I know that that's not true.
Yeah.
Anyway, shall I introduce today's guest?
Probably be good.
Right. So today we have Nina from Real Talk with Nina. Nina's a certified sex coach, speaker, podcast host, and former health teacher. She is also a freelancer in the mental health space and is known for shining light on the most taboo aspects of being human, mental health and sexuality. Nina uses humor, candor, and compassion to help everyday people learn to embrace who they are. She's a firm believer that everyone deserves to live a life of intention, authenticity, and radical self-acceptance. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you so much.
How are you?
I'm so happy to be here. I'm good. I'm great. Everything is perfect. Yeah.
Quick learner, that one.
My mental health is totally great.
See?
The weather is tropical and gorgeous.
Yeah.
And being a parent is like the easiest thing in the world.
I don't know what everybody's always complaining about.
And marriage is also very easy.
Can't forget that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No bragging, Jonathan. No bragging. Okay.
Don't say that to two married people.
I know. Nina, just in case our audience doesn't happen to know, what is a sex coach? I mean, are you in our bedrooms with us? Do you hold up scorecards when we nail the landing? What's going on here? You have to help me.
I actually bring a whistle and I wear this really sexy ref gear. And if there's a foul, if it's like a straight couple and the guy misses the clit, I throw the flag. I'm like, what are you doing? Offsides. It's funny. We laugh, but I've been asked, so can you come to our house? And I was like, it's not that kind of party, buddy. It's not. But I will say that there's really two types of sex coaching in terms of modality. And I look at it as hands-on and hands-off. So there's experiential sex coaching where you can have sexual surrogates, which you're literally partnering with a licensed therapist and their client. And you do hands-on work. And depending on the sexual surrogate, it could be full-on genital to genital. It could be hands to genital. It could be whatever. You find that a lot in California. And there are also more of the tantric sex coaches where it's light touching and no genital contact. So we laugh, but I want to be really clear that there absolutely are incredible sex coaches that are hands-on in a professional, consensual way, right? I didn't choose that route because I know myself, and that would be, I have boundary issues just as a human, right? That I'm sure you guys have picked up on already. So I know that just wasn't what I was interested in at all. I actually would feel very uncomfortable personally. So I do the talk coaching. So really what I focus on are all of the aspects and barriers that are preventing singles or partnered folks from enjoying their sexuality, their individual sexuality, and how that shows up in a relationship. I think, 10 out of 10 people in this world are closeted in some way I don't mean about orientation necessarily. It's about their kinks, their fetishes, their fantasies, their desires, all of that. We all have something that we're going, oh man, this would really be amazing, but I will never share it with my partner, right? I mean, I think we are terrified of rejection, abandonment, judgment. That's kind of a human thing. And so what's more vulnerable than our sexuality and all of the craziness that comes with it? So I typically work with couples. I have worked with singles. It doesn't matter who's ever struggling. I'm here, but most of my clients right now are couples. I have mixed orientation couples. I have mixed relationship styles. So I have non-monogamous couples. Like that stuff doesn't matter. And it's really just, most of the time it's sex drive mismatch, like I want it more than they do, or this is the kind of sex I want and they don't, or I don't know how to tell them what I want. Some of it is we have this fantasy and we have no idea how to bring it to life safely. Or it could be a little darker, it could be like we're on the brink of a divorce and there's so much resentment. And I don't typically take on clients if I know that up front, because to me, they deserve a licensed marriage counselor, not a sex coach. I can only take them so far, but yeah, I don't come into your room. Although I have had clients tell me in the middle of sex that one of their partners said, Nina will be so proud of us. And I was like, honestly, I'm kind of honored that I'm in the space while you guys are boning. I mean, it's kind of hot, but physically, no, I'm not there. It's all video calls, just talking.
Seems to me that predominantly it's a shame-based thing, right? Like you talk about rejection, you talk about, bearing our deepest, darkest secrets and it being a risk-based thing, right? If we share all of us, then the potential there is for complete rejection, and because it's the deepest part of ourselves, that it's where shame lives. And I don't know where I'm going with that, because I'm, this is me, and so who knows, right? But
I follow you all the time. Like, I don't ever feel lost when I talk to you. So when you're like, oh, I went on a tangent, I'm like, you did? I was right there, so I guess I did too.
So I suppose I would like to go there a little bit, like the shame bit. It's like, how do we disarm shame around sex, I suppose? Especially in sex that isn't solo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting because that's also a huge issue.
Oh, yeah.
Masturbation in relationships. I'm
Wait, are you allowed to do that?
Preparing a post. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not. It's actually against the law. And it means that you're cheating, actually. Gotcha. If you masturbate while you're in a relationship, that's absolutely cheating. You are falling for somebody else, your own genitals, and you should just probably end the relationship immediately.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So basically, I need to end my marriage.
Oh no! And you found out today.
I just found out today.
Welcome to the podcast.
You know what? I think on this podcast, I'm going to fess up to masturbation, and that I really do love myself more than anybody, and I'm just going to have to leave. But there's a lot of, we feel so much safer in our own minds, and so to get it out of our own minds, all of a sudden it's visible for attack, and we are never taught how human sexuality works, and how dynamic we are, and how our fantasies often have zero to do with what we want in reality. Like, I joke, but it's not funny. My porn search, you would question my moral compass, right? You would question my orientation. You would question my marital status. You would question everything. And in real life, none of that. I don't want any of it, right? And I think that that's a lot of where the shame comes from, is what does it mean that I'm turned on by XYZ?
But I don't understand. Like, I thought you would just be at home masturbating to vacation photos of your husband. Like, you're actually turned on by other things,
I mean, me personally, no. I mean, I only get turned on by the thought of missionary with my husband, but that's because I'm in a healthy marriage.
Okay.
You know,
That makes sense.
if you're in an unhealthy marriage, you're probably fantasizing about people that you don't know. Sometimes they don't even have a face. You know, clearly, if you don't know my humor, way sarcastic. I am actually shocked if I ever hear somebody fantasize about their reality. I mean, definitionally, they're literally the complete opposite, right? So I often tell people that you can fantasize about your partner if that turns you on. Often it doesn't, especially for women, believe it or not. Women are actually the first ones to get bored in a heterosexual monogamous relationship.
Wow.
Because, you know, our society is like, men need variety, men need novelty, men. Okay, we're not dead. We just have a vagina, right? Like what, who, where, like, we're not born going, you are going to be monogamous, pregnant in the kitchen, and you're going to love every second of it, right? Not true at all. And it's why the Netflix show Sex Life, have you guys, do you guys know about that? Mm-hmm. No. Okay. So it went nuts. It was like one of the top shows in Australia for a while. I recommended it to all of my female clients because so many of them feel the way this woman did. It was basically, it was like one of the first shows that portrayed the woman in the relationship as bored and wanting excitement. And I think very much like 50 Shades of Grey, it opened up a door where so many women are like, oh my God, thank God. Like, yes, that's me. Right. And it was basically this adorable heterosexual couple. And on paper, everything was picket fence. They had a kind, respectful relationship. They had children. Everything was perfect. And she starts journaling about a past lover that she had, who was the complete opposite of her husband. And the husband finds this journal and it opens up a bag of worms. And I think it really boils down to women are more psychologically, we need more stimulation as far as arousal and desire. So monotony doesn't really do it. And I say, and again, throughout this show, I will totally own that when I speak, there are stereotypes and gender expectations, all of the same messages that we've all had. And I understand that. I'm challenging those. But the truth is, like a lot of that's based in truth, is that I say sometimes, like oftentimes men are really happy just to get sex, right? They're happy having sex. Whereas women could have sex 5 days a week, 7 days a week. But if it doesn't excite us, we can still easily be very bored. I think a lot of that is just based on gender stereotypes. And we assume, you know, the water cooler jokes at work about the guys and you're like, oh, I just got the old lady at home and I'd love to have a threesome with 3 other women. And that's like acceptable talk. It's a joke. But the second a woman says, oh, what I would do to like, you know, get gangbanged by the local like college kids, you know, all of a sudden it's like, oh, she's a freak. She's like promiscuous and she shouldn't be married. And I'm like, but wait, you guys were just joking about all of you being married and wanting a bunch of other women. Why is it any different,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Misogyny at its best, right?
What's that?
Misogyny at its best.
Yeah. So, you know, and I even when I one of the greatest examples of this is I had an amazing couple that literally came to me saying, you know, the wife was like, I don't have a sex drive. I'm not sure I ever have. And I said, cool. Is there a clinical diagnosis? No. Then you have one. So we're going to figure out where that is. Right. And she was like, you know, good luck, you know, and they literally had kind of just submitted to the fact that they were probably going to have a sexless marriage right? And I like refuse to accept that unless there's a clinical issue or that both are okay with a sexless marriage, which clearly, the husband was not, but he was just great and just kind of like, well, I'd rather stay with you sexless than not be with you. But I always ask about masturbation. This is where masturbation comes in. How can you explain to your partner what you want mechanically or mentally if you have no idea? Everyone looks at masturbation as so separate, like, oh, but this is what I do over here. Like, I can't do that with my partner, and it's often, and it's not just women. Like, I have men that are like, I can only get off when I, am laying down, or I can only get off with this kind of a toy. Like, I can't do that with my partner. I'm just curious as to where's the law written that you can't do that with a partner? Does it not count? I don't understand, right? But there's this stuff that comes up when we talk about transferring what you do during solo sex to partnered sex. People are like, no, I can't. I have to be in this weird position and my legs have to be really tense and I have to be, I'm like, cool. What do you not do your legs only tense when you're by yourself? And if you're with your partner, they just go limp? Like, what's going on? I don't what's happening, but it's what do you fantasize about? What kind of porn do you watch? If you watch porn, do you read erotica? What turns you on mentally? Right. And then that's what you have to share with your partner. And that sometimes is the hardest part, right? Especially orgasm gap speaking, women don't always have a difficult time being like, hey, that's my clit. It's kind of like your dick, just treat it the same, but when we have to say, this is what I have to fantasize about, or this is the kind of conversations we have to have during sex to get me really turned on, that is really hard for more often for women to be like, hey, this is what I kind of have to fantasize about. And so this woman I said, well, do you masturbate? Not often. I'm like, cool. But when you do, I'm assuming you're thinking about something. And can you share one of them? Even if you just start with the most vanilla thing. She goes, it's the greatest moment in history. She goes, I mean, if I'm going to get off, I usually think about my husband sleeping with another woman. And his face was like, who are you? What did you do with my wife? And he looked at me like, how dare you bring this out of her? What's happening? And,
like an
and
exorcism.
I was like, right. He was, and these are not newlyweds, right? He was like, oh my gosh, what? Well, first of all, he responded like, well, what does this mean? Does she want an open relationship? Now, he went exactly where most people go. This is why we don't share our fantasies, because if I share, hey, I want, daisy chain, right? Then what if they're like, oh my gosh, now you really want it in real life? No. That's just what I think about to get off. I don't, so I think that's probably the number one reason why people don't share their fantasies, because in reality, if he slept with another woman, in most couples, she'd probably cry and be like, don't vomit, she was just like, we're done. But it's different. Your orgasm brain is different, and that's the hardest part.
It strikes me that actually probably most of the motivations, if most people's response is, and that means therefore you want something else, then the place we always go is, well, I must not be enough.
Yep.
All right.
100%. And it's the same thing with masturbation in relationships, right? Well, he's always masturbating. Why? I'm home. Why wouldn't he just, come to me? And so as a woman, sometimes I have to kind of speak out for the men and be like, well, can I admit something? There are so many times when my husband and I are both home and one of us are masturbating.
Nina,
let's just face it for a second. It's easy.
Nina, sorry to interrupt, but we've already started recording. That was actually on the internet now.
Yes. I was like, oh my gosh, did I cross the line? Because I never do that.
No, there are no lines. You did great. I'm sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
I'm like, how cute a line. Lines are so cute. But yeah, and it's just kind of like, masturbation is easier. I mean, it just is. It's easier. I don't have to worry about, what do I look like? Is he bored? Am I taking too long? Is he judging the porn that I'm watching? All of these things, they're gone. They're gone. It's just, masturbation is just easier. It is a different mindset to get into for partnered sex. So, but I think a lot of times people look at masturbation as the other woman or the other man, right? And it's not, to me, it's actually the complete opposite. It is like one of the greatest relationship tools on earth.
I think we're going to get a lot of questions about this. I can sort of just feel it out there, that because I think there are so many misconceptions about masturbation, solo masturbation within a partnership, even in the queer community. I know lots of gay guys get hung up on it too. I suspect people of all sexual orientations can get hung up on it because of the relentless modesty culture, at least in the US, that is just saturates all of our media messaging about ways we should be, quote unquote, during sex. And so I want you to keep going on this topic a little bit, like, because I can feel people thinking to themselves, like, wait a second. I mean, I hear the words that you're saying, Nina, but isn't it the reason that they're doing this behavior, especially if it's solo, especially if it's secretive, because I'm not providing something to them in at least some small way? And that's separate and aside from rightness and wrongness and blame. Isn't it just still because they are experiencing a lack on some level in what I'm giving them?
That's a great question. And if you look at the reasons why people masturbate, right? Even look at yourself, even though I know you guys don't masturbate because it's disgusting, but, you know, I'll take one for the team, you know, and I'll be like, I do. Okay. The reasons why people masturbate, they're bored, they're stressed, they're horny, and there's no one around to do something with. And yes, is one of the reasons. Could one of the reasons be their partners maybe kind of hitting a dry spell right now and their libido is kind of shot, right? And so they can't necessarily, they don't want to put pressure on their partner when they know their partner's not really feeling it right now. Sure. Could it also be that there is a complete disconnect sexually in the relationship? Yep. That could be something too, right? So usually what I say is, if there is zero sexual contact with each other and only solo and only masturbation going on for a length of time, again, I wouldn't say that the relationship is doomed or broken. I would just say, hey, let's talk about it, right? Because it could be, I mean, geez, over the pandemic, there were like 3 or 4 months where I was like, sex was the last thing on my mind. Me, right? It was the furthest thing. But when I was bored or stressed, I absolutely masturbated, and I wasn't even horny going into it. It was just like, it's like when you eat when you're not hungry. It's like that, you know, it's a coping mechanism for a multitude of reasons. So I would just say, to jump immediately to I am not enough is more a reflection of our culture when it comes to everything, relationships and sex. And it also starts to put pressure on your partner to start hiding it because they don't want you to feel that way, right? Because oftentimes, not all the time, I get that, but oftentimes it has nothing to do with your partner, right? And even if it has something to do with your partner, it is oftentimes nothing detrimental or long-term, right? Are there situations where it is? Yeah. But I mean, that's with anything. I'd say the majority of the time when people masturbate, it's easier. It's a crime of opportunity, you know? And yeah, it might be that, they only feel comfortable by themselves fantasizing about certain things. And it's hard to do that with partnered sex. So bottom line being, just fucking talk about it. Just talk. I know that it's easier said than done. I get that. I have a career because it's hard to talk about it. Right. But, it's like, if you want to know the answer, just have a conversation, and the way you communicate about it is going to dictate how your partner responds, right? So if you come at your partner going, you make me feel like I'm not good enough, right? You're always masturbating. What's wrong with you? You're like obsessed with porn. All of a sudden your partner goes, if I engage in this conversation, like I will never win this conversation. And then all of a sudden now there's shame, right? Now there's shame on your partner. Like, oh my God, shit, what is wrong with me? I do watch porn a lot. Maybe I have an addiction. And that's a whole other thing. The word addiction when it comes to anything sexual is very problem. What's the word? Not problemsome.
Problematic.
What was I thinking? Problematic. There it is, Jonathan. Very problematic in my opinion. In my opinion, I don't do the whole sex addiction, porn addiction thing. Is there compulsive sexual behavior? Sure. But I think when you add the word addiction, it just kind of feeds into the whole shame thing when I could watch porn 5 times a day, get off 5 times a day, and it not negatively impact my life at all. But if Mary watches it 5 times a day and, watches porn and she's really, really religious and she's really, really into the church, she's probably going to feel a shit ton more shame and think that there's some addiction, quote unquote, right? So I think using the word addiction when we talk about sex is another way to shame people into the closet. And that's what I mean by closeted, right? It's not just orientation. I think it kind of pushes all aspects of our sexuality. Like I said, is there compulsive sexual behavior? Sure.
Let me jump in real quick with a counter argument that depending upon how you define addiction might create space for people who resonate with that designation. For instance, if you define addiction as any compulsive mood-altering behavior that renders your life unmanageable, and you take somebody who is maybe masturbating 8 hours a day, getting fired from their job, losing their house, losing their relationship, all of a sudden that compulsive behavior has subsumed their life, then, maybe there's something to that. So I just want to create space for people who resonate with that designation, because there is a whole industry is not the right word. There's a whole community out there dedicated to working the 12 steps in the framework of sex addiction and codependency to sex addiction. So I just don't want to alienate them. I suspect what the three of us would all agree is be pragmatic, do whatever works.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And that's why I was saying it's just my personal opinion. I feel the word, if we're just looking at verbiage, right? So we have this like neuro-linguistic thing going on. The word addiction for anything, I think can feel so heavy. And it's more or less going, take the words away, right? And just go, if this is causing a problem, you deserve to get help to manage it, whether it's porn, sex, alcohol, drugs, gambling, all of that. So for me, it's more of a word thing, right? Do I think and do I know of people who it has ruined relationships? Absolutely. Yep. I think for me, it's I use the word simple in air quotes, as simple as if we could just change the word, for everything, even when people talk about like a mental health disorder or a mental health disease or, and I'm one of them. I have one of those mental health things, right? I love when people will say like someone's struggling with their mental health, or they're, some people even say neurodiverse when it comes to mental health. I think wording is so important, and I just don't want anyone to feel shame about anything, about their alcohol use, their drugs, their sex, their porn. I want them to say, hey, you're human. This is the card you were dealt. You deserve to figure out a way to manage it without any labels or shame in the process. That's my ultimate thing. And yes, and just like with alcoholism, right? I mean, there are people that swear by AA and that saved them 100%. And there are people that are like, no, that wouldn't work for me. I just stopped, or I worked out or whatever their thing is. Right. So it's more or less that it's almost like I want people to know that we're all in the same space, right? We're just navigating shit differently. That's what I mean. You're right, Britt. I'm glad you brought that up. I definitely don't want people to feel like if they've been, diagnosed with a sex addiction or a porn addiction and they're working through that and having that label actually help them to pinpoint what's going on and then have a better treatment plan. Rock on. I just wish we could take all the labels away and go, what are you struggling with? Porn? Okay, let's talk about that. Right? It's more like this Pollyanna kind of a vibe, I guess. So like, I'll own that. I have a bit of a rose-colored glasses thing going on.
I think for me, the labels thing is really interesting because labels can be used or weaponized rather, and we can become so identified with labels that it becomes difficult for us to escape them sometimes. And where sometimes labels can be really empowering, as in, this is who I am and I can give a name to it, other times that's not true, right? Mm-hmm. That wasn't a question, clearly. Just making a statement.
And I'm like, we have a really good response to this. I gotta think about the response. Yes.
It's like the labels should serve us. We should not serve the labels.
That's the response.
Yes. 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 And so when I hear the word addiction, there's a picture in my head of how I would feel personally if that was a label for me. And I would feel so heavy. And like Jonathan was saying, it's like sometimes our identity becomes the label, and from personal experience, I was always OCD. That was my thing. Hi, I'm Nina, I have OCD. Like that's almost like in my head, that was who I was. And I was broken. My brain didn't work right. I had really fucked up thoughts. And that was who I was. And it wasn't until a psychiatrist actually challenged me on that. And I was in my late 20s, early 30s, where he asked me, so what do you think like your strengths are? Like, who are you? And the first thing I said was, the fact that I've had this debilitating mental illness and I have been able to like lead a fairly successful, healthy life. And he looked at me and he goes, that's it? Like, that's your badge of honor? And I was like, my ego was like, I was like, oh my God, this is my badge of honor. I'm so strong, but he said, Nina, I have to visit patients in the hospital with OCD, and I can't enter their room unless I touch a door 5 times and, say a certain word, right? I have OCD patients that have been hospitalized because they're deathly afraid of getting food poisoning that they are not eating, and they are hospitalized. Forgive me for not being super impressed that you can actually hold down a healthy relationship, hold down a healthy job, get dressed, shower, be one with the world. Like, you got to come up with another badge of honor. And I was destroyed. And it was the single pivotal moment that changed my life as well. And so when I hear labels, right, and that does go for orientation as well, or there's definitely a projection going on there. So maybe that's also where it comes from, Britt, is like, just, and I remember a while ago, I used to post on LinkedIn before sex coaching world. And when I was really, posting more about mental health, and I said, I wish we would forget about the diagnosis and just focus on the treatment. And what I meant was like, oh, she has depression, or he has anxiety, or it's just like, what are you struggling with? I get anxious around blah, 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 blah. Okay. So can we just take the label off and just focus? We all struggle with something, right? Like that's like a given. And there was an MD, a medical doctor, that wasn't super thrilled with my post and wrote, "That's a horrible idea. So you're saying we should forget about diagnosing somebody with diabetes and just try to treat their symptoms and ignore the fact that they have diabetes?" And I politely responded, nope, that's actually not what I meant. I was actually specifically talking about mental health. And no, if somebody has cancer, the diagnosis leads to the specific treatment, but there's nowhere near the stigma with medical, physical issues than there are with mental. So I was just saying, like, somebody isn't depression, just like somebody isn't cancer. It's something that they have to navigate and get treated and survive through. And I think once we start throwing labels, it can, not always, it can make this like box that you feel like that's your home now forever. You're the kid with OCD. You're the kid with, alopecia. You're the kid. And that's what I would love to just kind of get out of.
I totally understand what you're saying. And also know that what you don't mean is that you want to take it any less seriously, right? It's like, and it actually surprises me a little bit that isn't taken more, the idea of giving people labels isn't taken more seriously, and the effect that can have on people, right? Like, I understand my own labels regularly cause me issues, right? And because they're difficult to avoid and steeped in societal, what's the word I'm looking for? Mine's gone blank. Great.
Let's help you manage that, Jonathan.
Thanks. That would be really good. Societal, just like discrimination and prejudice and, all of that kind of stuff. And so, like, when you have a label, whether or not you can control whether it's yours or not, it's going to provide you with some issues. And my example of that is obviously being a member of the queer community, and the issues that brings up. But when you start handing out labels as a medical professional, psychologically, and you're not paying attention to how that impacts someone, then I think you're missing something a little bit, perhaps.
Right.
Maybe.
Right. Yeah, like, I think too with, for example, bipolar.
Yeah.
I have multiple people in my adult life who have confessed, literally have said, I have to confess something. I have bipolar. And I was like, cool. Like, okay, what are you good? Like, are you all right? And like, oh, I just know how people think when they hear the word bipolar. And so I just always told people I had depression. So literally people are choosing other labels that are easier they're more palatable in our society. So I'm sure there are people who have been told you're a sex addict and they can't say that out loud. They might be like, oh, I just want sex all the time, or, oh, I'm a little compulsive when it comes to sex. So I feel like if you are someone who feels that you feel lost and would feel found and grounded and more able to proceed with treatment, if there was some sort of a diagnosis, get the fucking diagnosis. Do it, right? Do it. If you want, because if that diagnosis helps you find resources faster or better resources, do it. If you're finding that a label will isolate you, whether in your own mind or in real life, I can promise you, you don't need it then. It isn't going to change the situation, right? If I said, oh, I just am an overthinker and I have weird thoughts, right? That isn't going to change whether I have OCD or not, right? Whether I call it OCD or if I describe the symptoms, it's not going to go away.
That was really beautifully said, Nina. I really loved the way that it was really poetic, and I think you said it really beautifully. I'm going to go on a socialist rant, so buckle up. I think there's also, because at least in the US, I don't know what they're doing in the UK. Jonathan can tell us later. It doesn't make sense to me. At least in the US, we cannot make one move. We are just saturated in capitalist messaging, marketing, and sales. And so I can't help but believe that some people in the Western medical tradition have not been so conditioned to use labels as quick diagnostic tools because they are compensated and incented financially to do so. So while it may not be the overriding factor, I think it's really important to acknowledge that capitalism drives almost everything we do in the US society, and that it's much easier to market and sell to people if they are segmented by a variety of labels. It's just much more efficient. And I know that because I work in sales and marketing. So I know that to be true. And so it's just people are complex, people are messy, people are contradictory. And that doesn't jibe well with capitalism. Capitalism wants us to stay in our lane and to be neatly quantified so that we can be separated and conquered, so that we can think we're less than, so we can think we need to purchase things. And this is played out all sorts of ways indirectly as well when you think about social media culture. Look at all of the people patently unqualified to make diagnoses on Instagram that are out there popping labels on people like, you're a narcissist, you know, you're evil, you're wrong, you're right. I mean, people who have no idea what they're talking about slapping on labels because they get a little dopamine hit.
Yeah, that words, but like narcissist, toxic, those are such buzzwords. Attachment styles, those words have a purpose. There's a time and a place, but not everybody is toxic. Not every relationship is toxic. Not every nuance within a relationship is a red flag. Not every attachment style can describe the dynamics of your entire relationship. You know, and I 100% agree with you. Like, you're definitely more of an intellectual, Britt, so I'm not even going to try to like.
There's a reason Britt's on this podcast. He's the vocabulary, and
I'm not going to like authorize this conversation and like try to pretend to like have the wordsmithing skills that you do and talk about socialism, because I don't really know anything about it. But I can say that I know, what is it, the Sunshine Act, where you can see what doctors get paid, you know, for each, you know, the different pharmaceutical companies. And I think it would, if people were to really think about, wow, like this doctor gets paid X amount for prescribing, you know, Prozac, right? Well, now I'm kind of worried. Like, are you really paying attention to my symptoms and looking into my medical history and listening to me? Or are you just prescribing Prozac because you got paid from the pharma rep to do it? Like, it's scary. It's very scary, you know? And then I have, being in the mental health space, know so much about all the different medicines and the side effects. I mean, I'm not a doctor by any means, but people will come to me and say, oh, even like their child, oh, my child has ADD, so they put him on blah, blah, blah. And they tried this and this and this, but it's not working. And I was like, have you tried this? Oh, I've never heard of that. I'm like, try that one, because like, it might not be a big up and coming one where all the pharma companies are pushing, but it might work, you know? And I think that it's scary that we have to be an advocate for ourselves when we're dealing with our medical conditions, including mental health, because I think we're trained to assume that doctors are doing that on our behalf, the whole Hippocratic Oath thing. But I'm not sure that that's a thing.
I don't understand the US medical system one bit. I really don't. And what I've never understood is the whole advertising prescription medication on TV. Like, I can't wrap my head around, here's a list of things that might be wrong with you. You should go to your doctor and get this medication. What?
Wait, you don't?
What?
That doesn't happen in the UK?
No, of course not. Nobody in the UK knows what any medication does because because unless a doctor prescribes it for us, we don't know it exists. So I can't wrap my head around, and obviously it's capitalist nature of the country, right? Pharmaceutical companies want to make money, and for some reason, the law allows them to advertise huge lists of problems people might have and medications that will solve the problem. I don't get it. I just don't understand.
Well, I think even more bizarre is that they also have to talk about the side effects on these commercials
Really fast and in small print, right? Like,
the way they do it is like, people are running through the fields that have, eczema, right? And then there's
they
this
just
medicine.
diarrhea and vomiting. Yeah.
Yes, like, please talk to your doctor. Side effects may include, bleeding from the ears, eyes falling out, diarrhea, death, stomach ulcers. And they say it in like this sexual, like as they're running through the fields, eczema free, it's like you could also die and have diarrhea while you're dying. Like, well, I'd rather just have eczema. Thanks for the,
Yes.
I didn't know that wasn't a thing.
No,
I'm
pretty sure that the US is the only country where that happens. I'm pretty sure the other 200-ish countries have healthcare, right? So,
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, like public funded healthcare, where you don't have to pay when you go to the doctors or get charged for holding your baby after it's been delivered. That doesn't happen here.
We don't have healthcare here. We have disease care.
You do.
So that's a big.
So I'm gonna totally out myself here, but so most other countries, socialized medicine is that the government pays for all of our medical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if I go to the emergency room because my son had a concussion,
you won't go bankrupt.
The government pays everything. I pay nothing.
We pay for it via our taxes, but you will
higher than ours?
Never see a bill for medical care ever. I don't think your taxes are any higher. Our taxes are any higher than yours. I think they're probably comparable. We have conservative leadership here, and so they want to make the taxes as low as they can.
Well, yeah, no, I had to, that's a true story. My son did have a concussion. I had to get ER, and it's an automatic $250. They paid for everything. My health insurance, not my health insurance that we pay for every month, paid for there was a lot done when he was in the hospital. So thank God all I had to pay was $250. But in the midst of my 9-year-old son getting a brain scan to see if there was skull fracture or brain bleed, I'm going, they're going to charge you. Like, as we were leaving the hospital, it's $250. I'm like, I was just traumatized for 10 hours watching my 9-year-old vomit for 8 of those hours and get a CAT scan on his brain, not knowing if he was going to have to be held overnight. But yeah, all I'm thinking about now is that I have to drop $250 on this.
Most Americans are one car wreck away from bankruptcy.
It's insane. I can't imagine the idea of being unwell and having to make the decision about whether or not I go and receive treatment. I can't
take your medicine.
I can't wrap my head around.
What about like cancer though? Like if somebody has cancer and they have chemo and radiation,
is covered. Everything.
What kind of hippie paradise is this?
The only thing that isn't covered. No, even dental is covered.
Wow.
Our prescriptions. So we do have to pay for our prescriptions, but they're about £9. And the trick is, if you get it all at once, you still only pay £9. So even if you walk out with a bag of medication, it's only going to cost you £9, roughly.
So is the argument then that that the quality of our doctor, I'm making this up because I don't know, could it be like, okay, well then, is that why the quality of U.S. doctors is higher than socialized medicine countries because the incentive to be a doctor and make a lot of money isn't there? Is that a thing?
I don't know. I think we've gone off on a tangent here.
Nina,
I'm like, just pull that out of my ass. But I'm just thinking,
Possibly.
like,
Nina, I think that was a no comment. I think that was a polite.
Should we change track?
Yeah. So clearly we're passionate. Clearly we're passionate on this topic.
Know.
But
I really don't know.
One thing I did want to talk about with labels, because I am finding this fascinating, is I want to acknowledge the fact that we have inadvertently used all sorts of labels on this show, because that's how language works. Unfortunately, it takes meticulous awareness to speak in such a way that preserves everyone's dignity and creates equity and space for everyone. And we just don't have it all the time. And at least I certainly don't. And so we've used labels like women when what we really meant was cis women and not trans women, for instance. And so I just want to acknowledge that we've used all sorts of ableist terminology and stuff. And that's just the way reality works and free flowing conversation works. It's not that we mean no harm, and it's not that we're excusing that. It's what I'm saying is that we're learning. And the language is so complex, and there has been so much social change so quickly, nothing like it in human recorded history, especially with regards to queer rights. So we're constantly, the language is shifting under our feet. And because I know the three of us have so much respect for each other in all communities, we're constantly learning and evolving and trying to grow, that we're gonna make mistakes and then we own it. And so today we used ableist language inadvertently. Today we talked about women with the presumption of heteronormativity and cisgender presumptively, and that's okay, because we're learning and growing, and I just want to acknowledge and that we understand that, and then kind of pivot to a question based off of that, Nina, because in our prep for this interview, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that you identify as a cis woman and you identify as predominantly heterosexual, maybe a skosh of curiosity in there that you can expound upon if you choose. I am curious, because we're three friends, to sort of talk and explore, peel back more about the friendships between cis women who identify as straight and cis men who identify as queer, be they gay, pan, bi, whomever, because that is something that's been long celebrated throughout human history for good reason. And I think that there's a piece of it that ties into labels. We have been each other's safe spaces. We have felt like we could be more fully expressed in each other's company, which is beautiful. But I can't help but wonder if there's a dirty kind of underbelly there that often doesn't get discussed. And that's kind of like the reason behind our show, is to excavate those topics that often go undiscussed, to have more connection and togetherness. And I would love to hear your thoughts if you've had friendships with queer cis male friends over your life, what they've been like for you personally, how you've found them, and have you ever had moments where silently, quietly in the private of your own home, you thought, you know what, feels a little misogynist, feels like I'm not necessarily being seen as a woman when I'm hanging out with these friends? Have you noticed any trends there?
So this might throw everyone for a loop, because I think I'm backwards in a lot of ways. One, you had mentioned my orientation. Yes, I identify as a cis heterosexual woman. I've never been with women. I'm married to a man. I gave birth to what I'm assuming will grow up to be a man. However he identifies is fine with me right now. Pretty sure it's male. But I think I have a lot of internalized misogyny that I didn't really know I ever had until later in life. I would say things growing up like, I like guys better than girls. I always assumed a lot of my female friendships were very fake, whereas I was way more comfortable with my male friends. I did not trust women. When I say women, I'm glad you brought that up before, Britt. I mean cis women. I did not trust them. I didn't really feel totally secure in female friendships as I got older until college. I loved my childhood girlfriends. I loved, right? We were like not tainted yet, you know, but middle school and high school was brutal. I faked my way through that. College, I had incredible roommates that all cis female, and I was 100% myself and trusted them and never worried about anything. And that was really the first time in my life, aside from childhood, where I was like, maybe girls aren't so bad, you know? Again, later in life, being in this space, have challenged a shit ton of my own beliefs. And a big shift was actually on a podcast episode with Jonathan that I had on my podcast, where I find myself, like, if I think of female porn stars, for example, and when I had Jackie St. James, who's a feminist porn director, writer, producer, she's amazing. I had her on my podcast and I admitted this to her too. And she totally could see that, is when I think of female strippers or, you know, porn stars that are, you know, cis women, I have my own judgments based on what society told us about women in general, right? We're not supposed to be sexual. So if you are, you have, you know, daddy issues, right? Mm-hmm. But yet if I see male strippers, I'm like, oh my God, they're so hot. That's so hot, you know? Or male porn stars, I'm like, I mean, they're guys. It's like the dream job for them. There's always excuses to smooth over situations for men. And it was always not the same for women in my mind.
You know, I think, let me interrupt just a second, because you're speaking so beautifully, and I feel like maybe you're being a little hard on yourself. And that one of the things that I believe, and you can tell me if I'm just totally full of beans, is that in a world steeped in misogyny and male supremacy and chauvinism and sexism, we all make misogynist choices from time to time. I suspect even cis women. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how could we not? And so It sounds like then you had this beautiful awakening and flowering where you started to question and even resist that messaging. And then maybe, and you can tell me if this is resonating or not, but, and then maybe that was part of your, you know, journey into adulthood.
For sure. It also stemmed as far as how I showed up sexually in relationships. So I encouraged essentially the orgasm gap unknowingly. My orgasm was never a part of the equation and had nothing to do with the guys I was with. They were amazing. I was a serial monogamist my whole life. I had wonderful boyfriends, even at a young age. I have nothing to this day bad. I think I was very lucky. They always wanted to please. I mean, we were young. We didn't really know what was going on, but I never felt that they were saying your pleasure doesn't matter. In my head, a woman should be pleasing a man. These are silent reels going on in my head. These are reels in my head, not like what I was rationally thinking. It was just, I played out these messages in my life that I didn't even realize were there. You know, like to take time to please me is like not sexy, right? Like I'm not a desirable woman if I'm focused on my pleasure. That's not what makes a desirable woman. A desirable woman who's like a porn star in the bedroom with her partner. That's a desirable woman. And so that's what I worked on doing. Mm-hmm. And it really wasn't until, I mean, we would, in all of my relationships, we would have sex and it would be fun. And then I would grab my vibrator and I'd be like, either like, you can just go on with your day. Like, go ahead. Thanks. Good job, buddy. Or I'd be like, just kiss me when I get off. It was really like I was an afterthought because to me, it wasn't sexy. I still struggle with that. My husband is amazing. We've been together for 18 years. He knows all of this. And I still have to really fight through those messages that I have had in my head for so long in order to provide an opportunity for him to experience something that's sexy as fuck, right? Like I am not a small comer. Like like I joke, you know, and I'm just like, Britt, I know you want to hear about this. You'll sleep better tonight. Dinner conversation with your husband. You've got to hear how this woman comes. It's like, I joke and I say, I think that my gift, like my present for being such a, you know, I call it a bougie comer because like, I have a specific erotic formula, okay, like that I need to happen, right? And so my reward is I have super strong, amazing, you know, orgasms. But that was not something that I saw as sexy growing up at all. At all. I thought that like it's not hot for a woman to care about being pleased. It's like a chore. It's like, oh, she's high maintenance. I would be high maintenance. So that misogyny, like infiltrated all aspects of my life that I never knew. And then I think a huge moment as an adult was actually with Jonathan when he called me out on my podcast, and I'm forever grateful. And I talk about this on multiple episodes, by the way, Jonathan. We were talking about how my husband is attractive, I think. And so my gay guy friends are very open about how they feel about my husband, and they know they can be because I think it's awesome. And Matt, my husband, is like super chill. He's like, oh, that's awesome. Thanks. You know? And it caused me, that was kind of new for me, you know? And I was like, I wonder what it'd be like to watch a guy do something to my husband. I was like, wow, like that's kind of hot. Like, why am I responding to this? This is really hot. And then the second I switched it and it was like, what about my husband doing some shit? I was like hard stop. Right. And when I was talking to Jonathan, we were having this conversation and we were on video, and I said, you know, a guy going down or like pleasing my husband, that's really hot. But like my husband going down a guy, I'm like, it's like feminine. And my whole face cringed up. Wow. And I was like, ugh, it's feminine. And Jonathan, in his sweet British accent, was like, well, I can't do his accent, but was like, feminine, like you look like you're going to like throw up that you just said feminine. Like, first of all, why does a behavior have a gender? Exactly. And two, why are you as a female, as a cis woman, like disgusted by the thought, even if that was the case, even if that behavior did have a gender, right? Why are you so repulsed by it? And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God, I hate myself. What's wrong with me? And it was a really humbling, painful moment for me.
Jonathan.
Sorry.
And damn it, Jonathan.
I have this ability. It's the reason I'm a coach. I don't know.
That's your label. That's what your label serves you right there.
Yeah.
And he followed it up with another statement that completely changed the course of my life. Was, I think your problem is you haven't seen a masculine blowjob. And I was like, well, how the fuck am I going to find one of those? Right. And I was like, porn. Right. So Britt, I went to work and I had never, yeah, I did. I never watched gay porn, bi porn, never before. And I was like, I mean, I've seen it, but it was never something that I like went to. And I was like, I'm like on the hunt for like masculine blowjobs, you know? And quite a bit shifted for me very, very quickly. And here's what I've learned about myself. I am attracted to masculine energy. And my entire life, that always showed up in cis male bodies. Until I stumbled across TikTok stud lesbians. And this is where I said, you're like, how do you identify? I'm like 99.9% hetero, except for my TikTok stud lesbians.
So you have to explain what this phenomenon is for us.
Right. Oh, I can explain. So growing up in the 80s and 90s, there was like, you had butch lesbians that were like the short hair, you know, and that was it. That's all we knew. So, and I wasn't attracted to that. So I just assumed that I was only attracted to cis men. Stud lesbians are the one, again, really big overgeneralization here, but it's typically they have like the undercut, like the shaved undercut. So there's like longer hair-ish. Like sometimes they're like a combination of like, they're totally cool in their femininity, but they also have like masculine energy. So I find them aesthetically attractive and they have this masculine energy. So it's like they have this sensualness that is so beautiful about women and the masculine energy that I'm sexually attracted to. And I then dove into that and I was like, I'm literally responding to these women the way I respond to an attractive guy. And that threw me for a loop, right? So where I'm finding is that it's the energy I'm attracted to, not the person or the gender. I'm attracted to masculine energy. And although in my personal life, it's mostly come up in straight cis men, that's not the only way it shows up apparently in the world. And so that was really cool for me. And of course, my husband was like, really? The one time you decide you might be attracted to women, they're not going to like me either? Like, thanks. I was like, you're welcome. And then same with man on man action. We're always, the society is like, if anytime there's man on, like cis man, like gay male action, it's usually portrayed as like very feminine or, you know, they have like twinks and, you know, flamboyant. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, that's more of they're tapping more into maybe their feminine energy. And I'm not attracted to feminine energy. But when I see men together that are, regardless of gender identity or orientation. So whether it's trans men, it doesn't matter. If there's masculine energy on masculine energy, I'm like, fuck, that's hot, right? So I've watched trans porn where I didn't know it was trans porn yet. And then I was like, oh, they don't have a penis. I was like, but nothing has changed for me. Like, it's super hot to me. It's two men, masculine energy playing together. I'm like, that is so hot. So I've learned now at 41 that number one, genitalia and gender identity are two separate things. I mean, I've known that part for a while, but whether or not it really sunk in that's more recently. I look at trans men and I'm absolutely attracted to them. Knowing that they may or may not have a vagina doesn't really do much to that decision for me, as maybe it would have 10 years ago, because I was so attached to, but they have a vagina, so it's a woman. It's got to be. And that's just gone now for me. Because I realize it's not the gender or the body, it's the masculine energy I'm very attracted to. So that was huge.
It strikes me that we need better terms, right? Because feminine, masculine, actually none of that matters. And all of those terms are loaded because we have hundreds of years of Catholicism, Christianity, British colonialism. And so we get to actively seek better terms to describe it, right? Because there's still an element in the way that we describe it that puts the feminine as less than.
As less, yeah.
And that's baked in at this stage. And so it's how do we move past that? How do we move past the systemic misogyny and find something that is empowering, that allows us to describe things without the dripping, nasty, loaded emotion.
Right. Yeah, because why is flamboyant or emotional or sensual a feminine thing?
Amen.
They're culturally constituted. So it's like, what if you, Nina, were to explore, okay, so you love masculine energy, and maybe you agree with me that that's a culturally constituted word and carries all sorts of connotations. What if you sat down and teased apart all the specific elements that you wrap up in the label of masculine and explored which elements you were attracted to, and then refrained from labeling them? Like we did earlier, like we were talking about with mental health.
Yeah, totally down for that. Because I was speaking to someone once and I said, what does masculine even mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's changed.
What it means.
It's changed over the years. It's culturally constituted. It meant one thing in the 18th century, one thing in the 19th century, it means something now in the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, like, I look at myself as feminine-ish, but like I absolutely have societally constructed masculine vibes too. And I grew up thinking that feminine essentially was bad. And like I said, it went, we're weaker. We can't do things as well as men. All of the people in the government are men, well, not all, but ish. Most of the high level CEOs and doctors and they're men. So to me, it was okay. So women are really good for soft, fragile, purposes. And they're there to comfort, and don't touch them too hard because they'll break. And they're like a damsel in distress. And if I see a woman who's changing a tire on the side of the road, I'm like, yeah, get it, But in my head, I'm still like, she's probably a daddy's girl. Like her dad probably had to teach her all. Like it's always tough, masculine, or tough and strong and powerful and leader has been ingrained that that's for a guy. That's a masculine thing to do.
And you tell me you just tell me who is tougher and stronger than a single mom.
Right? Like I'm not a single mom. Right. Like I'm not a single mom. And the times where either Matt's been away or I'm going, how do they do this? Or the whole thing where pussy means you're weak. Right? Oh, he's a pussy. She's that means you're weak. Have you seen what a vagina can do? or take, right? To me, testicles are super fragile. So why don't we call like somebody who's weak a testicle or like a ball sack? Why?
We do in the UK. We do call people ball sacks in the UK. So. Oh, you do? Yeah.
But yeah, pussy is weak because it's attached to femininity and it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And so I didn't realize that I was a victim of that or on the receiving end of that until an adult when I looked back on my relationships, on how I acted in my careers that I had, how I responded to female bosses versus male bosses, a male that was a cis male that was strong and, Kurt with he's a good leader. He just means business. He's a good leader. If I had a female boss that was Kurt, she's kind of a bitch, right? Mm-hmm. That's like women aren't allowed to move up. It's very threatening, right? Like if you see women with on social media that are posing like thirst traps, it's typically cis men who demolish those pictures in the comments, tear them apart. It is so rare for a cis man, whether he's got a beer belly, if he's on the beach like waving and he's got a beer belly in it. Cis women, we don't go there and tear apart, put a shirt on, fat ass. But cis women, annihilated on social media because God forbid there's a confident woman, we're in trouble. We have to knock her back down. And I hate that.
I think even by cis queer men, actually. I think there's a huge element of misogyny built into the queer male community, which is horrible and uncomfortable. And you see it in, the whole mask for mask thing, and it's rampant. And I'm sure that includes queer men's female friends, right? I wouldn't want maybe not most. There are lots of decent queer men out there, but I'm sure there are things that they say out of earshot of their female friends that are not nice.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially about female bodies.
Yeah.
Wait, so you're saying queer cis men talk shit about cis women's bodies?
Yep.
Yeah.
Huh.
We live in a world saturated with misogyny, so we can't help but do it. We have to actively resist it. And that's where I started with the question, is because I've witnessed, especially as Jonathan was alluding to, when a female person is not in the room, different language is used, even inadvertently. They often don't even mean harm. They're unaware of the harm. Because we're so culturally conditioned to make all of this okay. We're so culturally conditioned to hold especially white women as the pinnacle of protected society, so that we can ensure we know who the mother of our children is, so that we can ensure the lineage of patrimony as we pass down our wealth from fathers to sons, that they're actually our genetic offspring. I mean, that's where all of this comes from. And then you fast forward several millennia, and then we're inadvertently talking about women's bodies in what we think might be praiseful ways at the workplace, but are actually denigrating and inadvertently harming their professional reputation, or where we actually are gossiping or mean to do harm and inadvertently playing into these chauvinistic stereotypes.
Right. Yeah. I didn't know that. You had originally asked me about my relationship with, cis queer men in my life. And I just had Dr. Joe Court on my podcast, where we talked about heteroflexibility in men. And I did talk about my kind of realization about my own internalized misogyny, based on that whole thing starting with guys finding my husband attractive and thinking that was awesome and hot. It was a turn on. But the second I flipped it, everything changed. And why did it change? I didn't like that it changed, so I went to work on it. And what also came out in that conversation was, I think there's a big part of me that is envious of gay cis men. Because, men in general, to be honest with you, cis men in general, honestly, I don't even think it has to be cis men. People who appear, who's seen a society as a man, because there's so much that I think I've closeted, and probably most cis women, that you don't have to, and that comes from especially sexually speaking. Dr. Joe was saying how 50% of gay male relationships are open. And I think there's a part of me that wishes, or that wonders, what my life would have been like to not worry about pregnancy, not worry about violence, not worry about judgment sexually. I was a serial monogamist, and I'm not sure, to this day, I'm not sure if it was because I wanted to be, or because that was the safest thing for me to do. Like I could be as sexual as I wanted in my relationships, and I was, but nobody knew because I was under the radar, because I wasn't single and doing it. So I was okay. And I see things on, like social media, where these reels where like these two guys are in a relationship and they're looking for a third just for fun, and I'm not saying that I could do that now. I honestly don't know if I could. I think, I don't know, that would be kind of hard for me. But the fact that, like, sometimes I want to be wired like a man. because I envy, and again, this is all stereotyping and I'm aware of that, but I envy how they're viewed in the world. I envy the freedom. I envy the friendships where they don't get worked up about certain things. Like, I wish I thought like a man, and I wished I could get away with things like a guy. And so I also connect more with cis men. I don't want to say cis men because they're trans men that to me there's no difference, but
what I would say is that the world is oriented to what we call the masculine. And so, of course, it's no surprise that you would feel that way. How could you not? You're inundated with messages that you're less than as you experience femininity day in and day out as soon as you wake up. So we all probably carry some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like a highlight moment in my podcast when I was saying this. I said, I really feel like I relate actually to gay cis men, or to gay men in general, more than any other gender orientation. And he said, I have to tell you, Nina, I've only spoken to you twice, and I see you. He's like, you're kind of a gay guy, And it was like the biggest compliment to me. And we were laughing because I don't know if a lot of cis women would be like, yes, but to me, I was like, he's like, your sexual openness and you're this and you're that, you're kind of like a gay dude. And to me, I like ran upstairs. I'm like, Matt, Dr. Joseph was like a gay guy. And he's like, congratulations, babe. But I feel like there's a part of me that hasn't, and I'm not sure ever will be, free. And I see that in gay men. When they go to like clubs and there's like gay men just running around half naked. Some of them are just having sex. And again, not that I think I could do that, but I'd like to be able to have the option and not be terrified.
Not be punished for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine if my husband and I got on Instagram and we're doing reels about looking for a third, and I know how people would see me. Because that's how I would see them. As painful as it is to admit that, I know how people would look at me. And yet when I see two guys doing it, it's like, it's expected. It's like, oh, they're guys. I mean, of course they can have sex and have no emotional attachment because every guy is like that. That's in my head. That's what we've been taught. Mm-hmm. And it's not true. I know many guys, gay and otherwise, that would never be able to have any type of non-monogamous relationship, right? But I am envious that women, I think we get judged on so many things that we can't help, so we just suppress it so we don't get judged, whereas I think men feel things and just do them because they can, and they're not. And it's okay, It's like, it's like guy sleeps with a lot of people. He's like a player. He's a stud. A woman sleeps with a lot of people and she's a slut and disgusting and used. The only difference between the two is one has a dick. Like, it's very frustrating. But then you don't ever know where the line is. Like, I don't know what I actually believe and I'm aligned with and what I've just been trained to believe. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I believe that I should say this. If I truly believe that, why do I have different perceptions of, cis women in porn and cis men in porn? And I hate that. I hate it. It gets me angry. It's embarrassing. Yeah. And I'll always try to challenge it. Always. I'm not ever going to be okay with being like, is what it is. Like, I've never been that way, clearly. So these are things that I challenge constantly. And
that's what's so beautiful about you. You're so open-hearted to learning and growing and getting real. Let's talk about your podcast, because if you thought Nina was getting real on our podcast, you got to hear hers, where she's running the show. It is an amazing podcast. Why don't you tell us more about it?
Thank you. So it's called Real Talk with Nina. It's available on all of your usual platforms. I will say I recently just switched it over to subscription. So it's $3.99 a month. It's like,
Cup of coffee.
Nothing. But it's like a cup of coffee. The reason why I did it was actually not for money. I have 2 young children that have access to technology. Mm-hmm. And I also used to have a YouTube channel. I still have the channel, but everything is private because they're at an age where they can access all of this information. Mm-hmm. And although I am incredibly open with my children, they don't have to know about me personally. Like, that's traumatic.
Or their friends to find out about you.
Right. So there's just a whole lot of personal stuff on there. Yeah. But I do have a couple free episodes that are up there. I think episode 1 is still free because I want people to understand what they're getting into before they subscribe. And so, they are really, really raw and candid and
fun and funny and illuminating. So you have to check it out. It's called Real Talk with Nina. You also have a Dirty Talk 101 guide, I believe, where because clearly you don't, you're the master of dirty talk, as everybody can tell from this episode. So apparently you can teach it too. So tell us about this e-guide that you have out there.
So multi-talented. So again, another really high ticket item. It's $5.99 on Amazon. It's called Talk Dirty to Me. You can find it much easier if you just go to my website, realtalkwithnina.com, and under resources, it's right there. But I go over, 5 different types of dirty talk, and from the super, super vanilla, for super, super like beginners, to humiliation and degradation, so I run the gamut and I explain the psychology behind them, because sex is all psychology. It's very little mechanics and a whole ton of psychology. So, it's interesting. I did put a trigger warning on the humiliation and degradation section because it can be triggering. Like, why would you want to say some of these things to somebody? But I explain why. And why it can be a turn on for some people. So that was actually really fun to create. And I even put a bunch of phrases that you could use verbatim, like tonight, right? You can get it on Amazon. It's like a PDF. Oh, wow. And, so yeah. That's
wonderful. I think one question that our audience might have is, could anybody benefit from these resources? I mean, you've got a wealth of resources on your website. And by the way, we'll include all these links in the show notes.
Okay, thanks.
But, you've got a blog, you've got all sorts of resources on your website. You've got this e-guide, you've got this podcast. Is it really geared towards cis women, or can anybody learn from what you're presenting or even hire you as a coach?
Yeah. So I try to be as inclusive as possible, knowing that I am not perfect and still learning and lived over 4 decades in a very heteronormative world. However, in my Dirty Talk guide, there's words you can use regardless of your body parts and orientation. It doesn't matter. I even sometimes put insert body part here. Like, I'll say, your blank tastes so good, and I'll say insert body part here, right?
Finger?
So, what's that? Your nose.
Your nose tastes so good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, your nose specifically, actually. So, yes, anyone. I'm actually, to be honest with you, I actually speak to more men than I do women, which is also amazing. Cool. Because I feel like as repressed and oppressed as women are sexually, so are men. So are men. They're not allowed to explore their pleasure. They're not allowed to explore their orientation. If you are not straight and have a penis that's huge and you can last 17 hours, then something's wrong with you. And considering most men don't fall into any of those categories, it kills me that they feel broken and stunted big time sexually. And God forbid they ask any questions about a cis woman's body, right? Because they're supposed to know everything, like out of the womb. They're supposed to know how to please a cis woman. And so they don't ask. And when they don't ask, the cis woman does not tell. And when she doesn't tell, there is no orgasm, and there's faking, and then there's resentment. And it's like, this is this cycle with the whole orgasm gap, right? So anyone can benefit from my Dirty Talk guide. Anyone can benefit from the podcast. Like I said, I do not talk about all straight stuff. I don't, because I really don't think, I think most people are not 100% gay or 100% straight. To be honest with you, I think there's situational dynamics for all of us, you know? But the coaching, there's, again, you can find me on Instagram. There's it's just at Nina Real Talk, I think.
Yes. We'll have a link. We'll put a link in there.
But in my bio, you can, if you click on the coaching, there's a discovery request. You can go to my website and click on coaching. There's like a form you can fill out. I do one-on-one. You know, if it's a single, I do partners. Doesn't matter how many partners you have. It doesn't matter what relationship style. I coach mixed orientation. None of that matters.
Wonderful.
I also know where my wheelhouse ends. Right. So I do not take everyone on as a client that asks. And it's not because I'm so good that I only take specific people. It's that I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not. And I'm more likely to say, I just did last week, you guys are best served by a licensed marriage counselor. I really do focus on the sexual aspect of a relationship. So if there's a ton of underlying stuff, work on that first, because the sex is just a symptom of that anyway. So if that's not there, you're kind of wasting your time with me. But yeah, it's all online. You can reach me anytime.
Fabulous. Thank you, Nina, for your work, because I think it's so important in this world, and for being here with us. It's been an absolute joy.
Thank you guys so much for being so brave to have me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Nina, this is such a huge topic. We could talk with you all day. You're so fabulous. We just are cheering you on the whole way and support you. And we encourage all of our listeners to go learn more about you and connect with you and on your socials and check out your website where there's just a wealth of materials. It's just been fabulous to have you. Thank you.
Thank you guys. And I want you guys on my podcast next.
Deal. You got it. It's a deal.
Okay.
You've been listening to Not Going Quietly with co-hosts Jonathan Beal and Britt East.
Thanks so much for joining us on this wild ride as we explore ways to help everyone leap into life with a greater sense of clarity, passion, purpose, and joy.
Check out our show notes for links, additional information, and episodes located on your favorite podcast platform.